everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Keeping Friendship Magic podcast, the podcast that brings together social science, friendship, and fandom to create a better tomorrow. I'm joined today by my very special co-host, as always, Miss Nova Rose.
Howdy, howdy.
Joining us today, we have two special guests on top of us, too. We have the lovely and talented Cosmo.
Hello.
And we're also joined by Keely of Keely Creations.
Hello.
So, if you can't tell by the guests that I've surrounded myself with for this episode, we're going to focus on art and artists in fandom here today. So, first of all, I want to give everybody a chance to kind of introduce themselves, maybe talk a little bit about what you do, what you have done in, whether it be in the Brony fandom, other fandoms, etc. Actually, do you want to start, Rose?
Sure. I guess I'm just sort of a budding artist. I finally started doing my first commissions ever, so
Yay.
Excited about that, but also nervous.
It looks great, though. I actually, literally today, she started working on a commission, and she showed me her work in progress, and I'm very impressed.
I think she'll be happy.
I think she will be as well. So, sure. And, Keely, if you want to talk a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So I am a traditional and digital media artist. Actually, being a brony got me back into selling at conventions and taking commissions actively. So I have a lot to thank to the brony fandom for that. But otherwise, I also love to draw anything that's creature related, dragons, real animals, imaginary animals, anything like that. Tends to be what I draw. And it usually is cute.
Yes, I can vouch for that.
I know when we just watched Beastars was kind of getting me more into wanting to draw that kind of art.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Just started watching that today.
Oh, we'll have to talk later.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet, but I'm about to start watching it.
Oh gosh, I have a feeling that's going to be the next big thing we're all talking about, but I'm not, no spoilers, it's still pretty new in America, so, let's see, where were we? Oh, Cosmo, it's your turn, go ahead.
So I've been an artist ever since I was a kid, but I've been in the Brody fandom since season 1, and it was the fandom that made me start actually pursuing art as not only in a more, a more kind of directed sense, but also in a professional sense. I started vending at conventions for the first time when I was a teenager, got into digital art and all kinds of digital mediums, and just met so many people through the fandom. So I definitely have, the fandom to thank for that. And I do digital art as well as traditional, a lot of My Little Pony fan art, but also original comics and paintings and all kinds of things like that.
Awesome. So definitely, I made sure to surround myself with talented people tonight just to make myself look better. But we'll dive into things here. So one of the things that I love to talk about with people is how their craft and what they do has affected them personally and or changed them. In whatever way. So, for everyone here, and anybody can chime in that wants to, how do you feel being an artist, and in particular, being a fandom artist, has impacted your life personally?
I know, for me, it almost breathed new life into me, where, it kind of gave me a little bit more of a sense of purpose, and the feeling that I was actually good at something for a change.
You're good at a lot, though.
Also, the thing that was nice about Pony is I felt like it was a little simpler to draw as opposed to some of the things I was trying to draw previously, where I was just not attached to that kind of stuff. But Pony.
Yeah, I think Pony also, just the character designs, the way that they're drawn, they're very approachable and they're very easy to learn how to draw if you put the work in. which I
Definitely.
think makes them, approachable for young artists to learn because they're these adorable, friendly characters that also have all these amazing lore and relationships and character design that just makes it so rich with possibilities to draw.
Definitely.
Also, I feel like
Yeah.
them having like really big eyes also helps with like expression work, or like yeah,
Hmm.
you can put a lot of expressions into those little horses.
Oh, I love drawing expressions. That is my favorite thing.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, definitely for me, it's everything you guys said. Pretty much is I was in an art slump for myself, um, and when the show came about, I had a friend introduce me to it, and actually, the first thing she introduced me to wasn't even the show; it was the fandom and the artwork that people were putting out for it already. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing. There's so much creativity, and a really great atmosphere for fostering that. And there was no judgment, and there was like just this really great vibe from the community. So for myself personally, like drawing ponies has allowed me to meet a lot of really awesome people and folks that I probably would not have met otherwise. And we're just from all walks of life, which is something that I can't thank the Brony fandom enough for.
I have to echo that sentiment. I still remember going to my very first BronyCon back in 2014. It was, and at the time, I didn't know anyone else in the fandom. I had that very stereotypical experience of you figure out that you're a fan of the show and the series, and then you're like, "Crap, am I the only one? Am I the only Brony around here?" So I just said, screw it, Baltimore's not that far away, and I drove down, got a hotel room for the weekend, and by the end of it, I'm hugging people I never met from, like, Alabama, that we just did lunch with that I had never met before. So it was like, it's crazy to think about how fandom can bring people together.
I remember, what was it, 2015? I walked into the vendor hall for the first time, and like my mind was blown.
Well, and to piggyback off that, that's a definite thing. That was definitely a thing for me of when I started learning about the fandom, and I started learning about all of this various forms of artistic expression that existed within it. It blew my mind. I didn't realize at first how much musicians and artists and like plushie makers and all this different stuff and these different crafts that were just there. And I feel like you'd almost argue it could be something that makes a fandom more of like concrete. It brings it into the real world almost, I would say. Like, it's not just people who happen to like it. There's something physical happening within it.
Yeah, and I a lot of the time if I have somebody who I think might be like, receptive to the fandom and I'm trying to introduce them to something, I'll usually show them music because as I'm sure we all know, the Brony fandom has so much iconic, memorable music.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the early hits that came out in like 2012, 2013, people who are still in the fandom or even people who have left still remember. And I remember when Discord specifically blew up on YouTube and the comments are all like, "Oh, I'm so mad. This is a Brody song." It's like, well, why are you mad? It's a great song for a great show.
I had an experience like that where I had what was it? It was a dubstep something. Vinylicious was playing in my car, and I was giving somebody a ride who was definitively not a Brony, and he was like, at one point he's like, "Who is this?" And I was like, "Oh, it's a Brony music," and then he's like instantly just like shut off, and I'm like, "Come on, man, open up."
Yeah,
Like,
I was playing music for somebody once, and it was Forever Free Brony, and they're like, "Oh, who is this?" And I'm like, "It's Forever Free Brony," and they're like, "The fuck did you just say?"
So I'm gonna bring us back into our kind of art now. It's obviously for me. I don't want to say I'm not an artist. I'm not a traditional artist. We'll say I'm not. I'm not an artist in the sense of what all of you are.
You're more of a wordsmith.
Sure, we can go with that. I consider academia and panels and all that my art. But so I'm always in awe of what people with that just drive and that ability to work at it can do. So thank you all for what you do. I mean, I've seen all of your works over the years, and I think I've had each of you draw me something at some point or another. So, but obviously, right now it's a very weird time we're in. We're essentially in lockdown in this country and globally for the most part. So let me ask, as an artist in this culture right now where conventions are postponing and closing and what have you, how has this been an impact to you and anybody maybe within the community?
I know for
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, for me, like, it's actually getting me to sit down and actually start doing art again, because I've been in kind of a hiatus for way too long at this point, so it's letting me get back to my roots.
It's definitely
co-signing that. I've definitely had a lot more time to devote to, I draw all the time, but I've had more time to actually sit down and kind of improve my craft with a little bit more dedicated focus, just because I have so much time.
For myself, I work in groceries, so I haven't had a lot of extra time in the past couple of weeks to focus on things, which I would love to do. Things might change this coming week and stuff for personal reasons, but basically, without conventions, I have to think about how I'm going to reach out to my audience, my social media audience, to try and get new viewership. I'm doing more streaming, and I have to set up my Etsy shop again, which is something I haven't done in quite a while because I usually rely on conventions to move my prints.
Right.
Yeah. So now it's just I have to be a lot more active on social media, even more so than I was before.
I mean, social media is definitely a big player, and it's a difficult thing. I mean, I can speak personally of I keep trying to find the right way to navigate it and not get myself too hung up on like, oh, I have so many followers or I'm doing this or that. But at the same token, there's an art almost to selling yourself because you have to, in a way.
Oh, definitely. Like, what I've noticed is that you don't have to post every day necessarily. You don't have to spam people's inboxes or, their news feed. But if you make a post at least every other day, give a little bit of content here and there. I mean, even that is a big help to promoting yourself. So
definitely.
But it's time consuming.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And I think that was the thing, is like I've been always so busy where I haven't been able to post consistency, and I never get a following.
It's especially.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You're good.
Just especially with the way a lot of these apps work, they, with the algorithm, the stuff that's popular gets more exposure and more views. So if you're just a little account or a little channel or a little artist trying to get started, it feels like, you're drowning in an empty sea sometimes.
I'm gonna bookend off of that. Something I know that I've experienced, and I know Rose here has experienced, is that sometimes you have this work that you put your kind of blood, sweat, and tears, and you're super proud of, and it seems like it barely gets any attention. And then you have some random piece that was barely an afterthought that all of a sudden takes off.
Yep.
And,
yeah.
Is that something everybody kind of just experiences? At least
yeah,
for the crowd
I've had
we have
that
here.
happen.
Yeah, pretty much.
It almost seems like the less work I put into something, the more exposure it gets, which sometimes, you would think, oh, that's great, but sometimes that just feels really discouraging for the stuff that I really do put work in that never seems to get seen.
Mm-hmm.
I think a big part
Yeah,
of
I think there's for Instagram, it's all about your hashtags. And if I like make a drawing about cats, like sketches of my cats, those outperform some of my finished traditional pieces. And it kind of makes me like, I guess maybe I should just sketch my cats for the rest of my life.
although that was one of those interesting things I was seeing. I think a post on Twitter about like brony artists that like they were basically saying that what was it, like their Rule 34 stuff like sold way better than anything else because I guess there's like a higher demand for it, or just those hashtags or something.
It might depend, and there's a lot that goes into that. Definitely. And it's a tough thing, and we're gonna be doing get ready, people, and within a matter of months we're definitely doing a Rule 34 episode, but stay tuned. But that's not tonight.
I feel like cats and porn are like the two like things that everyone goes crazy over.
Let me ask something going along with that. How do you and this is again open-ended to anybody who wants to answer, how do you as an artist measure your own success?
I know for me, a lot of my art tends to be targeted towards a very specific person, whether it be someone I'm doing the commission for, or like I did a lot of fan art from like fanfics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if I made them happy, then I was happy, and then that was my success. Like, I didn't need to have hundreds of thousands of views for me to consider it a success. So long as I made that one person happy that I was targeting, I was good.
Yeah, and I think, that you could get, 2,000 likes or whatever and only a couple of comments, but that one comment that might say, oh, this made my day, or like, oh, I love this so much, that is so much more valuable than those views and those likes. Because you actually hear it coming from a person.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of those sentiments too. Seeing as I've done a lot of commissions in the past, especially at conventions, that makes me really happy when I feel like usually you're drawing somebody's OC, or you're drawing someone's OC interacting with a show character, or you're drawing a show character that appears a certain way in the client's head, like mannerisms or funny things just out of the ordinary. And to be able to hand over that piece of artwork and watch their face light up is just, I think that's one of the best things I love about being at conventions, is being able to have that that face-to-face interaction. But as far as online, it's about the same, as long as I can go ahead and get that that same feeling from my clients in writing, then I picture that as a good success. But otherwise, as a general rule, I do try to push every piece that I do and try to do something different. So as long as I've done maybe one small different thing, that for me personally makes me pretty happy.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I've always been someone who, like, I can't stick with just one medium. I jump between medium, every couple of weeks. And I used to work in art retail, so I got to know a lot of products, and I was just surrounded by them all the time. So I learned so much. And for me, like, I'm not, I like getting people buying my art and people, leaving comments and things, but I really get the most personal feeling of success of just getting better with my own skill and learning new mediums and new techniques and new materials. Like, for me personally, it's more about it sounds cheesy, but it's more about the journey than the destination.
Well, I think that's important, because as artists, we're our own worst critics. And yeah, I mean, I don't need to really preach to the choir about that one, but
Yeah.
For any listeners who happen to not be artists, it is a battle that we fight all the time to try and not compare ourselves to other artists and their journeys, to really make sure that we don't lose our own momentum.
Yeah.
Also, I know what one thing I've found with that is like if you've been, especially if you've been working on a piece for a really really long time, you're just like you just can't get happy with it. It like I've noticed sometimes when I take a step back and then go back to it, I'm like, wow, this is actually really brilliant, and I'm like, I don't know, I guess just not having looked at it for a while, like gives me more of appreciation for the piece.
Well, there's definitely a sense of that from a psychological perspective, because when you are so enraptured in something, your mind is looking at it in a different way. When you kind of take a break from it and you kind of focus back, you take a look back on it again, it is a fresh perspective, as opposed to when you're looking at it all the time, nonstop, day after day. If you saw one imperfection last night, you're going to go right to that imperfection again in the morning. And then, but if you went a couple of weeks, a month, whatever, and looked at it again, maybe it wouldn't look so imperfect to you. And that's kind of the human brain in general, how it looks at things. Is a lot of times it kind of like takes a moment to just take that step back. I know we've been talking a lot about conventions here, and definitely wanted to ask specifically of Cosmo and Keely here, because I know you both have done some vending at conventions. So just kind of to get the experience of what it's like to be a vendor at a convention, to be an artist, selling at a convention space.
I mean, I feel like I've had different experiences at every convention, and it depends on if you're going totally solo or if you have help and other things. But it's really fun. Like, it is really fun. It's really rewarding. But I think a lot of people look at it and you say, oh, like these artists, like they're so lucky, they made it big. They do all these conventions and they're selling their stuff, and it looks like so much fun. And it is so much fun, but it's a lot of work. It's very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
As fun as it is, I think it's probably equally, exhausting and stressful. But it's still worth every minute. I would do them all year if I reasonably could sustain that.
Yeah, I've had to console some younger artists sometimes when they're like, I want to do all this big stuff and I want to sell at conventions like you guys, and then they might get some hard feedback, or maybe some like unnecessarily negative feedback on their work from the internet, and then they get super discouraged and they're like, well, I don't know how I'm ever going to do this. And I'm like, okay, look, it takes a while to build up to going to conventions and stuff, and you need to be willing to put in a lot of hours to not just the fun part, which is creating, but also the logistical part. I need prints, I need tools for setting up, I need to manage my money, I need to know if I'm going to have a helper or not, how am I going to schedule this, that. So there's a lot of logistics that go on behind the scenes. But again, I mean, like Cosmo said, it's no less rewarding. That's a lot of the payoff for me. Like, I'm still not making a ton of profit off of my convention sales right now. I'm like in year 5 of doing this, and I'm not rich. I'm definitely not rich. But what has been the best is hearing people's feedback directly. They look at your work, they stand in front of your table, look at your print wall, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is really nice work, or I like how you did this or that. And then of course for the people that commission you and then they give you good feedback, that has been the biggest bolster for me as an artist, and the biggest incentive for me to continue doing conventions is because of that. So
do you feel, this is something I think you both kind of touched upon a little there, do you feel that there is a misconception for some looking at you or artists in general, vendors at a convention, where they're looking at it going like, oh wow, like this person's got it big and they've made it, where you might be looking at it an entirely different way than them?
Depends on the convention. I find that bronies seem pretty knowledgeable about what goes on because the community is small enough where most people know artists or at least have talked to them enough where they're like, oh, there's a lot involved in this. Versus kind of a pop culture convention, which I have done in the past couple of years. I've done small ones, big ones, and you get all kinds of perceptions like, oh, this must be great just sitting there doing, just drawing all day. And I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of work. and
Yeah.
and like I'll give you this example. Bronies, like I said, very understanding. I think they've been some of my best clients. And versus a small book fair that I did in a local town. And I did a quote unquote commission for somebody. It was just going to be line art. And it was for, maybe like a 8-year-old. And the mom was paying for it. And she's like, well, let's just get the line art and you can color it in later. I was like, what?
No.
I kind of sat there and blinked and was like, wow. But that's just showing you like the difference between the types of people you can come across. So,
Wow.
so the audience makes a big difference.
Definitely.
I can imagine having my art colored in by a 8-year-old.
There are artists I've seen out there that have made coloring books, and they are like some really rad stuff. But
oh yeah, but
that's
I was like, this woman obviously doesn't get stuff
like,
commissioned. Like,
I mean, yeah, the difference with that is it's actually intended to be a coloring book.
Exactly.
Copied, not. Oh,
right.
God.
So basically, I finished the drawing and I was like, "R.I.P. drawing."
Oh man.
Oh goodness. Oh. Wow. So let me ask this. This goes right along for that. What pet peeves have any of you picked up on through your careers, through your dealings in fandom art and conventions and vending, etc.? What is it that happens where you're like, I wish people would stop doing this or asking me this, etc.?
I wish people wouldn't leave their drinks or their food on my table when I'm
oh, that's a
vending.
big one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can.
Like,
I can
I don't
imagine
mind
that.
if you kind of like set your stuff down, but please don't set your like sweating drink or your smelly Chipotle on my table.
Well, that's a big thing because, like, especially most of the stuff that gets vended at conventions, like, you get a drink spilled, food dripping on it, it's ruined instantly.
Yeah.
So that is a big thing.
Yeah, that's why anything on my table, I don't put out actual product on my table at all. I have, if I can help it, everything's in a protective sleeve at the very least. And it still won't stop like the worst from happening if it's really going to happen. But yeah, it still doesn't get any less annoying though.
Mhm.
Yeah, so if you are listening and you do attend conventions and you like to shop in the vendor hall, take note. Please try not to set your stuff on a vendor's table if you can help it.
Other pet peeves. I think when I have my commission list out and people are asking questions about like how much they can get for a set price.
Mhm.
I've been very fortunate not to have outright jerks at my table. Be like, well, I can do that on my own, or I can find this cheaper. But then you have people who want this really elaborate thing done. And you try to explain like, hey, that's going to either up the price or it's going to, well, yeah, it'll definitely up the price, but it'll also take longer. And I've had some very interesting requests over the years. But I think as long as you don't get too long-winded with your descriptions, you're good. Keep it pithy.
it's funny because I feel like I'm slightly the opposite in like I actually kind of like it when people give me crazy amount of details because like I like if someone is just like draw like maybe give me a reference picture, just draw them doing whatever. Like that for some reason freaks me out. And like I can like never figure out what pose I want to do them in, like expression, like I never know what I want to do with them. But like if someone gives me like a detailed like this is what I want my picture to go be, for some reason like I just can like work with it more.
And I guess that's
it depends. It depends on the person.
Yeah, definitely. I think person to person it will. But speaking from the side of somebody who is asking for the commission, because I run into this a lot, is I love getting commissions done, especially of my OC or of Rose's OC at this point because they're adorable. But but I like getting different perspectives and different views. So when I request things, a lot of the times I just go like, have at it. I tend to be that person because I like people to take a little bit of artistic expression to give me a different look or a different vibe than what I've already gotten. Every once in a while I'll have little things I'm kind of looking for, but I tend to be more of that. And I do always wonder, like, I hope they're okay with this.
Well, so I think it's really great that you, as a customer, like you've decided that's how you want to get artwork commissioned. So you'll get people on your end of that spectrum where you're okay with giving general details and a reference picture, and be like, hey, go for it, go to town, do whatever you want. I just want to see what you do. And then there's the other side of people that are like way too descriptive, and then if you get anything wrong, they're going to kind of be squeamish about it, and then they'll point it out and like, oh, I didn't really ask for this. That's not as much my experience, thankfully, but as I have heard that from other artists, either that or after the person is done explaining to me, then I'll be like, okay, so here's what I can do in this time frame. Like unless it's a take-home commission or something like I'm coloring it, not my convention commissions, because those are a different style. But yeah, that I usually ask for character physical description and a few characteristics, like what is this character like? What is their personality like? And try to take it from there.
Yeah, for me, a physical description is obviously necessary, but I need at least a couple of character traits so I can figure out their body language and their pose, because that affects so much, at least for me, about how the drawing is actually going to look. Just physical description isn't really enough. Like, I need to know who this character is and what they are, at least on a very basic level.
Because the thing is, like, I don't know, like, yeah, it's like I don't know what their personality is, or like what I should have them doing or expressing, because I'm like, I don't know what this character is.
Well, this actually just brought up an interesting thing that I want to ask everybody about, is in this line of work, how do you balance your sense of being an artist and having, kind of that artistic, like license or freedom or whatever, and having your own stamp on something, balancing that with satisfying customers' requests?
Well, I'd like to think if people are coming to me for a commission, then they've seen the prior work that I've done and that they're comfortable getting something in my style, or at least mimicking. I have this bad habit of making a lot of things in a lot of different styles because I love exploring. But if they point to something, they're like, I want it to look something like that. I'm like, okay, great. I'll go ahead and do it that way, in that style that I created. Versus somebody who, if they want me to, for instance, drawing a pony and doing like a pony OC versus can you draw me a logo? Like that's a completely different type of approach that I need to take to my stuff, and that doesn't give me creative expression necessarily. I have to meet the needs of the client in that form. So if someone's coming to me for traditional or digital illustrative work, I'm just like, all right, well, you came to me, so I'm going to assume that you're okay with what I do, and I'm just going to do it like I normally do. And
Yeah.
If you don't like it, I'm sorry. You paid me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to assume if they're coming to me for a commission, then they've already seen my general style of work and they're okay with that. Otherwise, why'd you pay me?
Although I will echo Keylime's perspective of like, I myself have definitely played with different styles, whether it be like a more cartoony style, like a more what's it called, like more realistic style, and like I love doing all of them, but I kind of need to ask, it's just like, so like, were you looking at for something more realistic or something more cartoonish? Because then it's like kind of better understanding of what they want.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's something I have to do as well, because I do both as well. So very important question.
So something that has been a little bit on my mind lately, because anybody who's been on Twitter over the last couple of months has seen a couple of interesting things that have gotten shared around. And Rose already knows where I'm going with it, but we've seen some, let's call them attention grabbing and not for the right way art pieces that have made the rounds lately. So going off of that, have you ever had a request where you basically had to say, no, I'm not doing that?
I have not, luckily. No.
I have not personally, because I have it stated on my commission sheet that I do not do NSFW or anything like graphically violent or offensive.
Right.
So, and I do point that out to people. Like if it seems like the person's explaining it to me and the commission might be going that direction, I'm like, just letting you know, I don't do these particular things. Mm-hmm. So that I haven't had to do any downright, no's to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's very important of like basically stating like these are my limits. Like me, like I don't mind doing slightly more gory or NSF, like just NSFW stuff in general, but like even I have my limits.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that makes sense too. Obviously some things too, and I've wondered this at times if people ever have pieces where you do them, you've done it, but it may not even be a piece you want necessarily spread around all that much. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Granted, I certainly didn't expect a whole, like, arguments about racism over an image recently, but we had that on Twitter. And these things, get popped up. And then, at the core of everything, you want to say that there should be absolute artistic freedom and people should be able to express themselves. But then there's also the flip side of it of some things, if you put it out there, it's going to have a reaction. You have to deal with it.
I mean, yes, I think people should theoretically be allowed to make whatever they want, but also, like, it's not about you all the time. Like, just because you're allowed to make it doesn't mean that it doesn't have consequences.
Mm-hmm. No, certainly.
Yeah, especially if you're going to put it out on the internet. It's like you're just asking for trouble at that point. If you know you've got a red button topic and you've made a piece that can be very inflammatory, it's your own fault at that point. If you put it out on the internet, it's like, well, good luck to you.
Although, like, that's one thing that always kind of infuriated me, because, like, I think just, like going kind of more of a Klopp place, it's like, I feel like Klopp is fine, you know, like, as long as it's quote-unquote tasteful. But, like, I hate kind of, like, people that are just, like, that just get angry by the fact that it even exists.
There's that, like, there's it's a tough thing, because it's like I said about, in a perfect world, we'd all have the ability to express ourselves artistically without consequence necessary. Or somebody would, and you could even argue that wouldn't be a perfect world, too. It's a matter, like, it's very tough, because it's like, how do you put limits on something that is kind of just imagination at that point? Because it's coming from within you, and it's a tough thing about judging it, and specifically with NSFW. And this is going to come up in later episodes of the podcast, I'm sure, but a discussion we've had, and I've actually had with some of you might know Dr. Edwards, aka Dr. Psychology, one of the Brony psychologists. He said something a few years ago that really stuck with me to this day, and it's the concept of having the door. And what I mean by that is, you can have something that's not everybody's cup of tea, but there should be a door. You can knock on the door, you can open the door, you can keep the door locked. The bottom line is, there has to be a door to get into it. And I feel like that kind of really is it. It's like you're free to create whatever you want for yourself, but if you're going to release it to the world, it's almost a sense of, like, especially if you know it's inflammatory, you know some people are not going to be their cup of tea, or if it's, you know, adult content and you don't want it to share it with children, having that kind of gateway, that door, to have them open it to choose to accept it.
Like, I've been seeing a lot of artists where all of that NSFW stuff would be just kind of locked behind Patreon, which is a great idea. But
I think and it's definitely a thing too. Like, there's a lot of great artists in the community who don't do NSFW at all. There's a lot of great NSFW artists in the community, and there's a lot of great people who do both, and I think all of which are fantastic to have, because, let's face it, diversity is what keeps us strong. It's just a matter
well,
of...
and you know, that's that artist's decision as well. So, like, if they want to go ahead and draw that stuff, more power to them. There will be a market for it. You know, should it be out in a binder at a Brony convention that's aimed towards, like, family oriented? Probably not. So that door you mentioned, you know, but yeah, it's just, again, kind of as an artist, being sensitive to your audience and where you're putting that stuff to be seen. I think that's a responsibility for each individual to determine that. So
yeah, and you know, just like you need consent to engage in an intimate act, you need consent for somebody to view, you know, explicit material. You can't just put that in front of somebody and think that, oh, it's fine, if they haven't consented to seeing that. So it definitely needs to not necessarily be hidden away under lock and key, but have something, you know, a barrier.
Yeah, that's a excellent point. It's a consent. It's really a matter of you know, consent of all parties involved in any action we take. That's a great point. We'll get away from that kind of subject matter a little. We'll try to trend a little bit different here, but do you does anybody here ever get the sense, like, and it's an interesting thing, and I know Keely brought up some about talking about the venue where you're at will determine it, but do you feel that we're still in a time where where consumers don't fully grasp what goes into creating a piece of art and what goes into, like, pricing and this and that, or are we starting to get better with it, you think?
Overall, I do not think we're getting better. I think, you know, people are just ignorant about the amount of work that goes into it. You know, not just creating the art, but all the logistics of setting it up if you don't have somebody to help you with that. And you know, I think it's interesting that, you know, so many people love comic books and Marvel movies and video games, and yet at the same time they don't value artists and don't think that artists should be paid a living wage and don't think that art is a you know, a career that you should attain to in college, or you know, people love art and yet they don't respect the people who make the art.
I think a good...
Oh, go ahead, Rose.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say. I think I a few years back actually designed and made a ball gown, and I think doing that kind of helped me better understand like why the heck like say those like $1,000 plushies are worth as much as they are, because materials are expensive. And any kind of like project like that takes a lot of time and machinery that normally like you don't think about, you know, when you're in the vendor hall and go like, why?
A lot of planning, a lot of research. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been spending my self-isolation learning to make a fursuit. So I've been to a couple furry conventions, and now that I'm learning how to make the fursuit, I have, you know, even more appreciation for these works of art.
Mm-hmm. I mean, on a positive note, it's not everywhere. And, you know, I think generally our Western culture is, or at least our American culture is still pretty ignorant of appreciating our artists and compensating them fairly. However, I have seen little beacons of light here and there. I think a couple of years ago, I was at Denver Pop Culture Con. It was actually Denver Comic Con then. And I noticed, maybe it's just because there were a lot of nerds there, but I noticed there were quite a few parents who were with their children, maybe like anywhere from 6 to 12, guiding them through how to approach a table, how to look at the art, how to politely ask questions, and just be overall really cognizant of the artist. And I found, and really respectful of the artist. And I found that it was a breath of fresh air for sure. You'll still get conventions where people will be disrespectful or kind of brush you off or make comments under their breath or something, or passive aggressive comments. But that's just a little beacon of hope that I've seen in recent years, of just parents starting to teach their kids, you know, this is what we do at an artist table. This is what we don't do. Like there was a kid fidgeting with one of my binders on the table and just like kind of doing that thing where they're grasping with their fingers, but they're not really turning pages or anything. The parents like, no, sweetie, like turn the page or leave it alone. You know, and it wasn't like the whole, oh, don't touch that. It was a constructive, this is why, like, we don't want to do this. This could mess up their product. This could do this or that. So I was very encouraged by that. And I hope that's encouraging to you guys too.
Oh my
I've had a little bit of that experience before as well. And it's always nice to see, especially sometimes if you know, have an unruly younger kid come up to your table and you're a little bit like, oh no. And then you know,
I'm sure we've all had those moments. I mean, and that's not even just, I think, vending at conventions. I mean, I worked retail for a number of years, and you had that thing if somebody walks into your store and you're like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
And now I work at a school, so yeah. Kids.
So yeah, it's, I've seen it before where somebody kind of mathed it out, I can't think of it, but like they calculated out like the amount of time that they spent on a project, and even just saying, if you just multiply out if they were paid minimum wage plus all materials on various projects, just how insane the cost really is if you look at it like that. Which, you know, in a day and age where, let's face it, we have a constant battle right now, even about things like our minimum wage and what's fair for a wage in America. You know, I think that that's definitely a thing that, from the artist perspective, maybe needs a fresh look again of how do we ensure that we are properly compensating those who are giving us what we want and what we need.
I think when I was making that ball gown, I think I just spent around 400, I think, just in the materials alone. And that was like all super on sale too.
Yeah.
Probably double that.
It can get pretty crazy. It can.
I think part of it is artists needing to be comfortable with upping their prices, because what actually ends up, not saying that artists are to blame for this, because a lot of us feel like, oh, if we're lower skilled compared to our peers, we shouldn't be charging as much as like people who've been doing this for 30 years in an industry. Like, you know, of course, that's apples to oranges, but what we do need to start promoting is that sense of self-worth in the artist community of themselves. Like even brony artists and everything like that, we just need to be like, look, your stuff has value. Don't be afraid to charge for it. Be realistic, but don't be afraid to get your prices up there. Because actually what ends up happening, I've noticed, as the price of my commissions have increased, people are still willing to pay those prices because my skill has increased accordingly. And it's not, you'll have your audience. People will want to pay those prices for the stuff that you do. So, and you won't get as many bad clients, like people who are going to try and squeeze you dry for stuff. You might still get them occasionally. Let's see how far they can bend you. But if you stay true to yourself and your self-worth and be like, no, this is my price. I'm not gonna compromise on this. Then, you know, you'll get much better clients down the road. And the worst ones will usually find cheap work elsewhere and get cheap results. But I think that is something that the artist community struggles with, is just learning to have that self-worth and stick with it, you know?
I think that's where I'm at now, is like, since I'm so new to the commission game, like, I have a horrible issue of like getting intimidated or getting down on myself and then like pushing things off, so it might take a little while for me to get around to a project. And then also, like, I'm still not completely confident enough in my abilities to like charge very much, so I'm like trying to go figure out right now. It's just like I have no idea what I should charge because I've really never done this before.
I'm sure as you work with it, though, it's going to be something you're going to figure out.
So, like, right now, look, especially with the coronavirus thing, like, I'm only really selling to people that, like, I'm already friends with, or, like, just kind of given, like, a, you know, pay what you want, really, because I know with the whole coronavirus thing, people are kind of stripped for cash right now.
We're all facing this together. But I think that's a thing, and again, I probably sound like a broken record with this, but we're all going to get through this together. And we're, you know, honestly, I wish I could support more artists than what I have been lately. Like, I've been hitting up some vendors and stuff that I know haven't been able to get to cons, and I'm trying to get more done, and I would love to be able to do even more than what I am.
Although that Discord vendor hall, though, was really cool. I appreciated that.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a lot of great art and a lot of great artists in our community, and definitely feel very blessed to know all of you on this call, who have all been wonderful people to me and wonderful artists. I know we're kind of low on time, so I just kind of want to put it out there. if everybody has any kind of last thoughts or things they want to say about being an artist in the community, or if you want to speak to the artist or burgeoning artist. I can word good today. But anything you guys want to kind of close with?
Well, I think as far as brony artists go, keep hanging in there. Our community is getting smaller, and that's okay. But what's going to end up happening is sometimes that could create a very cliquey, kind of drama-ish environment. If you're just getting into fandom art or brony fandom art, don't give in to the drama. Just keep doing what you love. Keep making the art that you love, and that's just art in general. If you keep doing the stuff that you love, not just because it sells or XYZ profiteering reasons. It's if you're doing it from your people are going to see that come through in your artwork, and that's what's going to also keep you growing as an artist. So whether we are all trapped in our homes because of coronavirus, or if we can eventually all get out of our homes and start attending conventions again, just keep drawing, keep going at it, keep improving, and keep smiling.
Yeah, I would say, we have, if you are one of those people who is not a healthcare or grocery worker right now, or, an essential government position, you're probably at home. So take advantage of this time. If you have all this time in front of you, learn how to draw from a new perspective, or learn how to draw hands, learn how to draw whatever. We have a great opportunity right now to work on these things maybe more than we've been able to before. So, take advantage of that, because you're not going to get an opportunity like this again, probably.
I think my big thing, especially for budding artists, is not to get discouraged. Just keep drawing, even if it's like a freaking stick figure every day.
I know, I believe it was Lauren Faust who said something to the extent of you have to get like 2,000 terrible drawings out of your system before you start making good ones.
Yeah.
I can believe that. I'll agree with that.
It's true.
So, that being said, I do want to thank everyone for joining us again today. I'll give everyone a chance if we can tell where people can find you, any projects you have going on, or anything you want to speak about coming up. Let's see. We'll start with Cosmo.
Yeah. So I'm on DeviantArt and Instagram these days mostly. I have couple comics I'm working on. One's a My Little Pony comic, and then I have actually 3 different original comics that I'm working on right now. I'm trying to branch out into furry art on top of My Little Pony. So you can find me on Instagram at Cosmic Feline, or DeviantArt at Cosmo Cat Crafts.
Awesome. And Keely.
Oh, well, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Keylime Creations. That's where I usually post most of the time. Twitter tends to be more of like reposting memes and artwork and general tomfoolery that comes out of my head. I also stream on Twitch, and both my Twitch and Twitter handles are at Keylime Keely. And I try to stream every week on Thursdays and Fridays. So if you can catch me there, you can watch me do art live. And I have commissions open right now. If you're interested in that, go to my Facebook page for more information. It should be the first pinned post. And other than that, I'm also trying to do more original art. So,
all right, fantastic. Rose?
Yes, you can find me either at I don't think I've ever shared this one. Nova Marcellus on DeviantArt. I haven't posted there in years, but I'm really hoping that changes. Now that I'm starting to be more putting myself out there. You can also find me at Nova Roselia at on Twitter, though I also pretty much only repost memes and follow people. That's kind of all I use that for. If this thing clears up and Techo is allowed to run, I will be joining my partner in crime here, doing a couple of panels. Other than that, you can also find me at TROCON, doing the same thing.
Anyway, come to TROCON. Yep, and as
Anyway,
always, you
come
can
to
find me
TROCON.
on Twitter at KeepFriendMagic. Also, Facebook.com/KeepingFriendshipMagic. I will be not sure when this is going to fully air. I'm going to be part of Ponyfest Online on March 28th, which might be before this episode actually goes live. But we're also looking to do more streaming events coming up. So stay tuned for that. We're hoping to have more details on that soon. But otherwise, once again, just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Thank you all for listening. And as always, remember to keep friendship magic. Thank you all.
All right. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.